Alright, welcome to the Sashiko Live Streaming. This is Atsushi, and this is the Sashiko... this is the Sashiko Live Streaming where I stitch Sashiko and while talking about Sashiko. This is not a lecture, this is not a webinar, this is not a tutorial, so if you could bring some of your stuff to stitch, join with us. And if I can make this live streaming as a place to be together, that'd be great. Let me check the audio first. Yep, that's probably good. I got a pretty good feedback last time, so I hope that this audio is good today. What else am I supposed to say? I think that's about it. I brought the topic today to talk about Boro a little bit. Boro and Sashikos are very related. I cannot explain Boro without Sashiko, and in order to explain what Sashiko is, we have to talk about Boro, so it is very related to each other, so I will talk about Boro a little bit while stitching. If you have any specific topic for me to cover, any request for me to cover, please let me know. I cut my finger today, so I might not be able to stitch as smooth as usual, but let's see what we can do. I will change the camera just a second. Should be good. Hello. There's not that much problem with cutting my fingers. And no matter how badly I cut my fingers, I usually can stitch. And I am going to stitch today as well, but this is probably the worst place to cut. So this is not because that I do not want to stitch here, because I don't really have any pressures. It doesn't really bother. But the worst case scenario is the blood might come out, penetrate the band-aid. In that case, I might have to go and get another band-aid. But pain is not the issue. Hello. Welcome to the live streaming. I mean, sometimes blood might be good. But at least this is something clean. This is something I would like to make it clean, so blood is not probably a good idea. When I just mend, probably blood is something very ordinary, so it's all good. My rule is if you're bleeding, you get a day off. I was thinking about it too, but I will be stitching regardless. So let me see where I finished last time. There gotta be somewhere. There I go. Good evening. Thank you so much for coming today. So if the blood started penetrating the band-aid, I may stop the live streaming. So before that, please let me know if you have any questions or requests, probably. Although I mentioned that I might be doing the Instagram live streaming without any announcement, I did not have time or chance to do it this week. Has been quite busy, and I think I have allergy to something. There's a little difficulty in breathing recently, so I hope today is gonna be okay for that too. God, I'm not as healthy as before. At least I'm still bleeding, so it's good. But things are getting different. That kind of connect to the story about Boro. It's probably good idea. It's a very good idea to not to stitch while you have a bleeding finger. And I should not do that because the blood can be on the fabric, and that can of course destroy the project, especially if we are doing it for somebody. You don't want to mix something with blood on it. At the same time, when we define Sashiko as the stitching in the ordinary and then Boro as the only result of those ordinary stitching, blood is actually a part of the life. So that means that we are adding story to the fabric with blood. So that's not always a bad thing, I guess. I mean, it's not a good thing, but we have a choice to not to stitch, but they did not have a choice. That's something we are missing in today's Sashiko. Nobody should go to the place where there's no choices, but we have to acknowledge that we are enjoying this practice with many, many choices. But the origin is that they did not have much choice. So, those are the things that are missing right now, because Sashiko became the trend and Boro became some term to describe some certain things with values. I did not cut my finger to explain what Boro is today, so it was purely coincident, and it happened just 30 minutes ago or so. I was cleaning the dishes and then I accidentally touched the knife. My knife is extremely sharp because I sharpen it pretty much every week. I like that process too. I like that not a practice. I like that. I like sharpening my knife. So I think I like those things to make. How do you describe those things? Like very, very minor things very insignificant things. I like to sharpen my knives. I like cooking. Something that I can do with my hands. I really like that. I think every quilt I have made carries this evidence that I do poke my fingers. See, that's a good memory. Although it's a blood, but that's a good thing. I mean, you don't poking. Oh, that's a good point. You may not believe it, but little tiny poke like this, I don't really feel pain, or even if I poke strongly, that doesn't bleed much. Maintaining my tools, yeah. I think what I was trying to do is to be mindful. I don't like the word mindful too much, but I like to organize. I don't want to show my room because it's extremely not unorganized. So I'm not saying I'm really organized person, but I like to spend extra time to care for the details. And as much as I can, I would like to organize those. Which does not make sense because if my wife watches this live streaming, she's gonna be furious because my room is quite unclean, especially in comparison to her room. She's very clean person. But yeah, that's we believe that there's a spirit in everything. So taking care of those things, being mindful of what we're doing is quite Sashiko-like things to do. I believe that's very important. As of now, there's no blood coming out, so I can keep going. I was worried about if I had a little pressure on the thumb, the blood might come out. It's not the case, so it's gonna be okay. It's September. It's almost the end of September, so 3 more months and then the end of the 2022. So I am not going to finish this 100-meter of Asanoha. I have to probably say that at this moment, which means I have to apologize. I did not promise that I will complete it within 2022, but I kind of imply that I might be able to finish 100 meters. Unfortunately, I'm about not even half yet. Close to the half point, but it's not really even close. I mean, it's not even over the half yet. So it's gonna be the next year's project. Continuous project. Well, as long as we keep stitching, we're gonna be okay. I had to spend a little more time on reviving the fabric. Reviving the fabric, like bringing fabric again to the stage so that they can be used. It's my mother Keiko's philosophy to bring every fabric to be on the stage again. And I kind of wanted to do that for the quilting making for this year. Well, I have another month. I'm trying to complete that as soon as possible and submit it to the QuiltCon 2023. I hope I can make it by that, but I made something very simple. Not as simple. I think I made something very accurate. There was a little how can I say? I wouldn't say disagreement, but there was advice from my friends that instead of making precise quilting with Japanese fabric, she advised me to express what I would do. So quilting requires, in my understanding, I'm going to talk about it about quilting. Quilting requires very good precision, control to be precise. You have to, you don't probably have to, but you're going to cut the fabric in a very, very specific shape. If it's square, it's square, and then the size has to be identical to make a good quilt. So one has to be quite precise, and one has to have those skills to make it precise. And I thought that was the sort of definition of the quilting as well. That's one big difference between Sashiko and quilt. So I decided to follow those quilting precision as much as I could and try to add some of the stitching as Sashiko. But it seems like precision is of course good and a good part of Sashiko, but it does not mean that I have to do those things too. Many definitions are there. As long as there are three layers, top layer embedding and then the bottom layer, it can be considered as quilting. The design of the top quilt will not be defined by the accuracy or precision. So, either way is the option, but I think I feel more comfortable doing the non-cutting. So in order to make it precise, we have to cut the fabric. Of course, right? In order to make a certain square, we have to, of course, cut the fabric. So, but I followed some of the principle or some of the artisans saying that we do not. I mean, cutting the fabric is the last thing we gotta do. There's a story that we should consider cutting our own hand or arm when we cut the fabric. That means like we have to be much careful, more mindful when you do that. I already did it, so it's a quite non-Sashiko things to do for that matter. But I thought that was more like following the. You won't believe what just happened. I was finishing some dishes while listening to you speak before sitting down to sew. I just slid through my finger. Well, you don't have to copy that much. You can copy what I do, and I always say that please copy if you can. You don't have to slice your fingers, as I did. It happens though. There are no quilting police. You are allowed to create a quilt as you would like. They're not quilting police? Huh. Interesting. But police is some of the things, but aren't they like are there anybody who tried to sort of protect this strict definition of quilting? Like whatever is a little scary. I mean, nobody said whatever here, but if I start saying like I can do whatever I want in quilting, I do not feel comfortable because I feel like I'm ignoring something important or somebody's voice. And it's not even doing policing. Like, yeah, policing is the word for that. I don't think it's. Somebody called me like Sashiko Police, which I was not doing at all. I don't really patrol at all. I just have my platform and then say things, but it's not a policing. Oh, there are people that are okay. That's good. So as long as there are people like that, that's perfectly good. But it has to. Not it has to, but it's good to have many angle. So I don't really fight or even I don't even worry about those Sashiko's change, either modern, traditional, free, or very strict. I don't really worry about that in Japanese. That's why I don't really speak up in Japanese much. Because I believe that should be both, and I'm speaking up in English because it is very dangerous to make that whatever in another language where the Japanese people cannot reach to. So there are specific cultural quilting traditions that are protected, but quilting it's such a large and diverse thing. Okay. Yeah, that's something I kind of understand, but at the same time, there are things that are different from quilting Sashiko, and that boundaries are not so clear. However, I would like to make sure that people do not jump to the conclusion that there's no difference between quilting and Sashiko. What we do is quite similar, but there's a significant difference. People often joke about no quilting police. I have made many different kinds of quilt, but my next one will have Sashiko stitching. Yeah, so as long as As long as one knows what they're doing, I think I'm okay with that. Does it make sense? Um, the very unfortunate case scenario is that those who learn Sashiko from somebody intentionally ignoring the Japanese culture, they believe one answer as the answer. As the result, they call their stitching Sashiko without even knowing what's going on. And that's a good intention, right? Like nobody is trying to do anything negative. But because there's one person in between, well, not a person, one group of the people in between, as the result, good, pure, innocent people become part of the problem. And I really like to avoid, well, I have to avoid that. I really have to avoid that. What is the difference between the obvious? Seems obvious, but would like to hear your opinion. The difference is just it happened in Japan and in the English. I mean, the difference between Sashiko and quilting is there are a lot of difference. There are a lot of difference, and many people can discuss that. But as the needlework per se, it's the same thing, right? They use the needle, they make fabric stronger somehow. They make for their life. So the significant difference is that the background, where happened, when happened, by whom. So for that, Sashiko carries many Japanese mindset, Japanese philosophy, ordinary culture. Without that, when we ignore that Japanese part of the Sashiko, then I don't know if I can say Sashiko and quilting is different. I don't know if I can say that. Of course, from technical perspective, from the pattern perspective, there are a lot of difference, I guess. But if somebody asks me, like, is that really the difference? I don't know if I can say those are the difference. It can be just choice. But they are different because of the stories behind it. It goes to the same thing goes to the kantha in India, and the probably nameless stitching, or probably with name that I don't know, in many places. It's really it's the same thing. It's just name is different, and then culture is different. So that's why we are different, not we. They are different. So it's like an extreme analogy is like, I am Japanese, right? I am native Japanese. I was born in Japan and I came to the US. I'm an immigrant, but I'm Japanese. And you are, American or German American. You have your heritage, right? So we have difference. I am different from you and you're different from me. That's difference, and difference is good. We have to appreciate, not have to, we would like to appreciate the difference as the result of this, whole diversity things and accepting societies here. But we are all human. We are the same as the human, but we are different because of the gender, race, culture, preference, value system, age, anything. Those things differentiate that. And Sashiko and quiltings are, in the big picture, it's the same needlework, but it's significantly different because of the culture or how they grew up behind it. Does it make sense? That's why I keep saying it's extremely important to learn the Japanese culture but at the same time, you don't have to really understand Japanese culture to practice or to enjoy Sashiko, because you can be friend with anybody, right? Like you can be friend with anybody. I can be friend with you. We are different. I'm Japanese, but I can be a friend of any race, any age, any ethnicity, any gender preference. Anybody, we can be all friend. We can communicate. However, if I want to say that I'm German, I would probably should be able to speak German and should be able to talk about their culture a little bit. Well, I don't know why I picked German, but like American. Let's say I am not American. Although I immigrated to the US, I'm not a citizen, and of course, those status-wise, I'm not American yet. But I don't know if I can be the American long term because my culture is so strongly attached to the Japanese. So, what I would like to do, what I would like to communicate right now is that you can, of course, practice Sashiko without knowing anything about Japanese culture, unless you know, as long as you know there's a story behind it. But when you start teaching Sashiko, then we really have to be careful, because that means that you are doing something on behalf of the bigger group. That's what I'm saying all the time anyway, but I like to go to quilt show, but with COVID, I watch quilt shows on YouTube. The quality and expertise of many Japanese quilters have raised the bar in quilting. Let's not talk about quilt in Japanese. It's our scary place. Look, I'm extremely amateur in quilting, right? And there's it's a quite deep and huge category industry in Japanese quilting. So I'm like a that's another reason I did not make quilting for the last 3 years. The first year, 2020, I got an opportunity to teach in QuiltCon, and I sort of jumped into the quilting world, and I got amazed. I got very much inspired. So I tried to do that, but the more I read about those quilting in Japanese, the more I kind of hesitated. I got a little bit freaked out. I got scared. Of course, I'm still scared, but I got an interview with the Japanese quilting magazine. I had a chance to talk to some of those, and it was not as scary as I thought. So I'm trying, but if I start teaching quilting, stop me. Just that's the time. That's the crossing the line. I will never teach quilting. I might join some of the classes in the quilting when I have a chance, and I'm the member of Modern Quilt, but please stop me if I start teaching quilt. Like, oh, he lost his mind. People do. Like, I will do. If things get if I get cornered, I cannot promise that I will be, nice and always soft. I may have to do something for a living. So, if I say like I will teach anything you require, stop me. That's the basic understanding of difference. But that's very, very basic. Of course, there are many differences in the subcategory, I guess. So teaching is the key. Teaching. And if when they kind of define or when they specify what they're teaching, then I don't think it's a problem. But teaching on behalf of the whole picture is the problem. I don't even talk on behalf of the whole picture of Sashiko because I don't think I should, and I don't think I can. No, it's not like I don't think I should. I don't think I should, and I cannot. It's impossible to be on behalf of somebody in the cultural practice. So yeah, that's the reason I keep saying that. I'm saying probably scary thing for those, but I think that's okay to say those things too. Like, why am I supposed to speak English while they don't speak Japanese? Doesn't make sense. It's great that I can speak English, but you know, sometimes people say I owe explanation when I criticize those things, and I don't think I do. And I will explain that in my own language, but as long as I criticize them for not speaking Japanese, I don't think I owe any explanation for that. That's something I try to do in my visible mending class too. I try to make sure people know what I am actually teaching. Yeah, so that's very important. And don't get me wrong though. Like this is very important, so I will repeat that again, but there are two types of teaching in the big category. There are many types of teaching, but in the big category, there are two types of teaching. One I would consider as the navigation, guiding. Like school teacher, like I cannot appreciate it enough for my daughter's school teachers, but they are more like a guidance, right? They are not special. They are not specialized into one subject. They don't probably have the PhD in mathematics or biology. They do have some degree in education probably, but they are professional as the education, but they are not specialist in one specific field. So one teaching can be the same as guiding, navigating, introducing something new. And when they consider themselves as that kind of teacher, let's say that teacher in fashion design is mentioning about Sashiko briefly, I don't think that's a problem at all, because their goal is to navigate or direct or guide students to show as many scenery as possible. So that's not really, like, I don't mind. Many people worry that, I'm teaching Sashiko as a part of my stitching group. Am I disrespecting that? No, you're not. Like, that'd be great if you can mention my name in the process so that they can research further when they want to do it. But guidance itself is a very respected job, and that's one field. And of course, the other side is the professional, like very, very specialized, like professors in universities. Professors in university shouldn't be able to teach all the subject, but they have to be very specialized in one subject. And that what I say, the special, like, if the teacher who teach Sashiko as that speciality, then I think they should spend more time in learning what it is before teaching. And well, the reason I keep complaining is that because that's not the case. But guiding and also expert, thank you, expert, and then also the guiding. Those are the two different. And as long as one is trying to the guiding side, not only I do not consider them disrespecting, I kind of appreciate them. Not a kind of, I sincerely appreciate them introducing the bigger picture. So it's very weird. I would never teach something I do not know, so I wouldn't really teach something I would like. I don't think I will teach something I can Google tomorrow. Like, am I gonna teach how to make salsa tomorrow by watching the YouTube videos? I mean, salsa is pretty simple. You can mix chopped vegetable. It's probably doable. But I wouldn't do that because I don't think that's, especially to somebody who does not speak their language. And fortunately, there are many teachers who comes to me and learn about Sashiko, and I really appreciate that. So they come to my workshop or my class to learn what Sashiko is so that they can mention about it in their class. They don't really specifically teach Sashiko, they just want to mention about it, and when they mention, they want to make sure that they, understand what they're talking about. So that's, when I say teachers, I'm not saying that everybody who teach. So please don't get me wrong for that. It's quite important because, that's not what I'm trying to do. Okay, so it took about 30 minutes to come back, but today's topic is Boro. Boro, right? I probably brought the topic as Boro. Just a second. Yeah, Boro. So you let's say that you know about Boro, okay? If you don't know about Boro, please go to my channel playlist and then learn what Boro is. Or go to the my Instagram, and there are several explanations what Boro is. But assuming that you know what Boro is, many Western people love Boro. They probably even say love or like. Like is not the word love. And I don't. I mean, I consider Boro as beautiful pieces. Some Boro can be beautiful, and I think it's beautiful things when it comes to the art. But do I love it? I don't. Boro is not something the Japanese usually would love, especially if they know the story behind it. So but that probably is not gonna communicate when we look at the result, because the Boro is introduced in English as the result of something, like recycled or upcycled, repurposed fabric, patchworked. Those became the word for Boro, but it can be interpreted like that, but the original word for Boro is not that. Then I was really thinking, like, why am I so bothered by those, those like result? Oh, I made a Boro is a little weird phrase for me, because Boro is not something we specifically make. But okay, fine, you made a Boro, that's fine, because Boro is one result of stitching, so it can be Boro. But the worst expression is I Boro stitched. Sometimes people say I borrowed. Like Boro becomes the verb. Again, like we might know this one already, but the Boro means horse feces, horse poop. So it's not really positive word. And unfortunately, that not negative, it's like more personal. And I kept saying like negative, 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 but there's no such a thing as negative part of Boro, but more like personal. The Boro is more personal. So that makes sense. That explains my preference. Like, I don't dislike all the Boro. I like Boro too, but not everything. So it's not like it's not a yes or no question. It's not a dualism question. There are things that I like. There are Boros that I like. And I try to kind of, categorize what is the things I like and what is the things I do not like. And the key word I could find is the personal. It is very, very personal thing. So for me who practice Sashiko, what matters is who made it, not what is made. When we know who made it, that's great. When we know who made it, probably we can look for the purpose of them making it. And that's great. If we cannot find the stories, which is the most case scenario, 99.9% of the Boro, we cannot probably find the story. So then we have to imagine that. And, Fabric sometimes talks, so we can imagine those stories while looking at Fabric. But when we imagine those stories, it can be too personal. Like if you see blood, that's quite personal too. So that's why it's kind of difficult for me to say that I love Boro. Yeah, I used to hate, by the way. I used to hate Boro, and I used to even disrespect for that matter. And none of my artisans liked Boro. We never tried to make any of those. Never, ever. It's very recent that I started realizing the beauty of it. And it is beautiful, don't get me wrong, it's beautiful. But sometimes it can be very, very personal. And probably those who do not stitch do not understand this part as personal. If they look at those board pieces as the art, probably that makes sense as well. If they don't stitch, I understand. Well, if they consider this as the art, yes, they probably consider that as the art. I just don't want them to mix the art dealer's value and stitcher's value. When we stitch, I want you to make Boro more personal rather than art, for that matter. Well, we have to go back to the previous live streaming about is Sashiko can be art, is Sashiko art. But this personal is very, very, the keyword, the personal, is very, very important. And I want you to kind of look at the Boro. If you like Boro, that's perfectly fine. I'm not judging at all. I'm just sharing my personal preference. And I just want you to keep reading, keep listening what Boro can be for the Japanese people, and define that by yourself. And especially if you're a stitcher, you can imagine those things. So if you can, think about it. I want to imagine that, and that's gonna be one answer for that. When I came into all this, I thought the same way about Boro being beautiful and artistic, but watching your video definitely changed how I view it. It can, well, thank you and sorry. It can be beautiful in the same way that anything ordinary can be beautiful, but it isn't like an art piece to me anymore. It's a story, and sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not so good. Yeah, you summarized it very well. It's scary. It's beautiful, but it's scary for me. It's too powerful for that matter. I just don't want. It's very difficult to define. Well, that's why I'm not defining anything. But do you have any garments that were made for you? Do they require mending? Yes. Yes. So pretty much the Boro I have, or Boro I own, is either made by me or my mother or the artisans around. 95%. Is there anything? No, actually 100%. Well, somebody might help my mother, so I wouldn't say 100%, but like consider my mother as the producer of those mending. Everything is either made by me or my mother. So, and I call them Boro, but at the same time, for me, Boro is not the result. It's contradicting. Sorry, Boro is the result, but not the definite result. Make sense? I'm gonna say it again. Boro is one result, like one result of stitching. So if I keep stitching this one for 100 years while using that, this will be Boro. But Boro is one result, one outcome of stitching at one point. Next day, it's gonna be to be Boro again. And when you stop stitching, it's gonna be Boro again. So it can be the result, but once we put in the, it's like a balance sheet. And profit, like PL, profit loss statement and balance sheet statement. It might not make sense, but so when we stop stitching, that's the end of the cycle of Boro. So it has to be able, not has to be, but ideally, I wanted to be able to stitch. Is it still done in Japan for its original purpose, or has it changed to more of the art form? Nobody does Boro in Japan in the original form. Those do Boro are usually art dealer or the fashion designer right now. Nobody does. So please do not give the compliments to any elderly people wearing Boro. I don't think they are such a people, but that's extremely insulting. If that's the very, very fashionable person who is obviously wealthy, then they might be choosing to wear that. But let's say you go to some very rural place, if you find some, person with Boro piece, looks like not fashionable, like not in the urban setting. It can be extremely, but probably not 2022. Those people, after the internet, those people who needed to make Boros are non-existent because we can get the job. There's nobody, I hope there are nobody who has to stitch for their life. Buying stuff is more cheaper than fixing. And original purpose of Boro can only happen when they have to stitch. Original. So, but of course, if you'd like to try to make Boro, you can by doing the stitching. So if there's anybody who understand those stories and then trying to make those, yes, we can call them originally. We can call them original, but I don't. It's two complete separate categories. One who stitch for the Boro's original purpose, and then those who makes money, who makes living, who makes industry, who make business using the word Boro. They are more like fashion designer, fashion leaders, and I think both of them are good. I respect both of them. Don't get me wrong, I respect both of them. Both of them are very important, as long as they're Japanese for that matter, though. If that's happening outside of Japan, that's a very scary thing because they can lose a lot of sense. If the fashion designer is Japanese, they will, at some point, will come across the Japanese Sashiko or the stories. Because there's tons of information in Japanese still. And they can read Japanese, they can communicate in Japanese. So it's not gonna be different. I mean, it's not gonna be significantly different. When it's happening outside of Japan, then we have to worry about it. Yeah, it's 2 or 3 generations will be on its way to Boro. Is true, but it does not have to be generations. You know why though? Can you explain? Boro is to textile as kintsugi is to the party. No, don't mix Boro and kintsugi. It's very different. It's similar in the practice, but different. Very different. So, for example, kintsugi is very familiar. It can be very well associated with wabi-sabi. I'm not gonna talk about wabi-sabi here today, but I don't think Boro is like it's very arrogant to associate Boro and wabi-sabi. If somebody's saying that Boro is the wabi-sabi, that's a little too much. That's too ignorant. Like there's so many uncertain things that they're trying to define without knowing what the hell they're talking about. So kintsugi and sashiko are very similar as the practice, but they have quite different stories behind it. It's too simplified. And I know that's what the many people wants to have as a simplified version of definition. So, I've heard it's not only you. Many people say that, but since you're here, it's quite risky. Risky is the word for that, I guess. So, I said that in order to make Boro, Julie's assumption is quite correct. It has to have 2 or 3 generations, right? It is true. Like most of the Boro piece we can find are the result of 2 or 3 or even 4 generations. But in 2022, we can probably make Boro-looking piece in one lifetime because of several things, but mainly because of 2 things, 2 reasons. Think. Well, actually, it's one reason. It's the same. It can be the same reason, but 2. I would like to say 2 reasons. Oh, yay! I'll just drink something. So the reason that we can make the authentic Boro in one life cycle, not the overgeneration, is that first, the fabric we can get today is not really the hand-woven. As the result, it's quite not strong. Oh, Julie, perfect. That's it. So the fabric quality is different. I'm not gonna say that was better before, but either we use the new fabric, which is mass produced, or the vintage fabric like this. Those may be very, very strong, good fabric who survived many, many generations already, but because of that time has passed, this is already weak, so we have to kind of enforce that. So either we use the vintage fabric or the current new fabric we can get today. It is a little weaker than the fabric they probably made or used 300 years ago. I wouldn't say less quality. I said it was less quality, but it's not less quality, more like it's strong or not. Handmade is often stronger in the correct me if I'm wrong. Handmade is usually stronger in the textile, I guess. Maybe. So the second thing is as exactly Julie said, washing machine and dryers, and also detergent. And the last thing is the frequency to wash the garment. Washing requires a lot of water, right? And they had only one garment to wear outside, so I imagine that it was not so common to wash that jacket every single day. And I don't wash my jacket every single day, but since we live in this today's society where smell is pretty, significant, you don't want to be stinky when you meet somebody. And fabrics can do just so much. You cannot hide everything. So at some point you have to wash it. And even if hand wash, that can destroy the fabric. And also we don't have skill to wash it because we depend on the washing machine so much that we do not remember how to wash clothes by hand. So those small factors is gonna damage the fabric more significantly. As the result, we can unfortunately make Boro in one life cycle. Probably not, like, I'm not talking about 50 years or 60 years, like 10 years or even 5 years. But that does not have to, you don't have to make Boro. If you want to make Boro, that's the kind of case. So one thing to define what Boro is not the word for patchwork. That's what I keep saying. Boro is not the word for the patchwork, so please don't use that. The patchwork is a very important part of Boro, but Boro is not a patchwork technique. In order to make one piece as the Boro, one process is extremely necessary, and that process is using it. When you use it, you might have to wash it. So that process is gonna make your fabric or item as Boro-ish to be. And then that's never-ending story though. That's never-ending story. And then at some point, when you look at the piece, it may look like Boro, and then you can call that authentic Boro. So Boro is never-ending story in stitching, as long as you keep using that. I like to think that I'm giving 3 or more lifetime to my husband's work pants by stitching. That's so beautiful. We have those technologies right now. Take photos, add stories, like leave stories. Imagining is a great ability we can do, but understanding the story is more kind to the next generation. I wish I don't have to imagine so much. So those are gonna be if you're gonna call those pants Boro, that's perfectly fine. That's exactly what they did to make Boro. And that's very that's a very respectful way to use the word instead of using Boro as the any patchwork, colorful patchwork. So like as a summary, I'm not really gonna be criticized this, but if somebody patched these small colorful patches on fabric, like recycling fabric, colorful one patched like randomly, that's great. That's a beautiful art. But if they decided to hang it after framing it, and then decided to call it Boro, do you see a little strangeness there? Like after after listening to those stories, does it make sense that, well, that's not quite it? That's the uncomfortableness I feel. There's nothing wrong with what they do, but it's very uncomfortable. I wash clothes that touch my skin directly, but I prefer to wear a layer underneath my clothes and wash only that on each wear. That's a very good way to do that. It takes a lot of wear before my outer clothes start to smell and get visibly dirty. I have a friend who did a missionary work in a place where the washing lady would beat the cloth against the rock in the river, and then his clothes were shattered pieces with the mud. Yep, if they start patching, they can probably make Boro jacket, Boro denim in a day or so. Not a day, in a year or so. So, like, I brought this one. I made this one last year-ish. I don't remember. Like, I keep stitching. Whenever I find a hole, I keep adding. It's quite new. It's the scarf. I brought it out because it's getting cold. Over the summer, it was in the closet. Or I don't remember where it was. But now I washed it. Today I washed it by hand, nicely. But already it's coming out like that. Yeah. Well, I have to cut this one again. So this is the scarf I kind of use. Warm my neck out. Neck out? No, I warm my neck around. And I'm gonna use it for this year. So I have two of those. Probably this one. This is the third year. This one is the third year. This one is more like a third year, which you may have seen already. The difference is light, heavy. It's lighted, heavy. Light, heavy, light, heavy. So those two are the scarf. I keep forgetting that word. Scarf I use. And by using that, by washing it every single week, month, at least every single season, every single nah, probably I wash it every week at least. It's gonna be like the Boro-ish, and I really have to keep patching because this one is gonna come off very soon. Like there was somewhere that I really needed to patch. It's always a good idea to mark it if you don't forget it. See, I have to look again. I'm not gonna. This has a hole here, so I have to do something here. But sometimes hole is good, unless it's not going to completely completely break down the scarf itself. So I do not consider them as the authentic Boro. But if I look at the one part of the result, it can be Boro. And it's gonna be Boro in the future if I keep doing that. And this can be beautiful, but I wanna, well, thank you. Thank you. At the same time, I hope that you can find this beautiful because I made it. It's not the result. It's who made it with the stories, not the actual result. Oh yes, I forgot to mark where some holes were. Ensure that it took like 10 minutes to. Yeah, it's kind of difficult. Like, we always forget about it, and we have all the tools, we have all the choices to use. We have a pin, we have a clip. So it's just purely our laziness to not to do it, and it's not good. I really have to do better. So denim doesn't get that bad easily. For some reason, well, denim is pretty strong. So I don't really have a Boro to be denim. Shirt, I do have some Sashiko Stitch shirt, but they're pretty strong too, and I don't wash it every single day. So two things, like Zoking, which I don't stitch again because it's too dirty. I just usually throw it away because it becomes too dirty to even stitch. But Zokin, the cleaning rug that I introduced in another video on the YouTube, and scarf is two things that I'm working on as my thing, and they are jacket and civil sort of like Thor, like a blanket that my mother passed it down to me, which I will pass it down to somebody. There's so many of those, so I cannot really. Not so many, but a few pieces. I don't, need a few pieces of. Well, it's my mother, so. Anyway, those require some patching and some stitching. So every year I get it out. I use it while I sleep. I let my cat touch it, so the damage is gonna be significant. I'm not on purpose, but the cat sleeps on that. And that's, those are the Boro I have. I do not carry any Boro made by somebody else. It's a little too much. Well, exception. If I can wash it, I might get it. But washing is the must. I have to be able to wash it. The water sort of cleans not only the dirt and smell, but we believe that water cleansing can cleanse out the spirit as well, or some feeling inside, or even thinking inside. We call it nen. Nen is the like a mind power ish. So when we get a vintage fabric, we always try. We all not even try. We always wash it. Wash it until we feel nothing. We feel not negative about those things. I love your Boro scarves, and I like that you keep mending them as they need repair. I love the stories tied to the piece you made. Thank you. Thank you. I cannot add or that's thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. We do admire it even more now since we know the skill it takes and who makes them. Yes, and I think that's what it's supposed to be, though. We can admire, we appreciate, and then that's really beautiful things to do. But we can be anybody in this internet world. Google, YouTube will teach everybody what to do, for that matter. And many people copy what I do, and that's okay. I encourage them to copy, so I'm not complaining about that. But when they decided to make money of teaching as the expert, I kind of demand is probably the word. I wish they could be the same play. I don't consider them as enemy. I keep saying this. I do not consider them as enemy. I just wanna be friends. But in order to be friends, we have to be able to share the same amount of level. I'm not even 40 yet, but I can share those stories because I've been doing this for I have not been stitching for my whole life, but I've been with Sashiko my whole life. So that's the difference. It's so sad. That's why probably I like doing the Sashiko class in Japanese. I see many experts coming to my class as well, and I get really nervous when that happens. I do rescue a lot of old clothes and then aloha clothes I find here, and I soak and rinse as needed. I lay them in my bathtub. Yep, it's very important to kind of reset those stories. So this might sound like again the contradiction, but stories will make the piece more beautiful. At the same time, stories can be the curse at some point. So let's say that I use this scarf entire my life, and then you receive this as the next hair. It does not have to be family. You receive this one as the next hair. Then you might want to wash it very, very carefully and mindfully, because you know the story, but at the same time I want the person to have a fresh start as much as they can, which is probably not that easy, but I want to heritage only the good part of these things. But when we talk about the heritage, since I cannot make a living trust like provisional, not a provisional, vacational, no, provocable, no, living trust. Since I cannot make a living trust for those pieces, I would like you to go through the probation very, very carefully so you can cleanse it out. Then you can get only good part of the. That does not make sense. No, that was a bad idea to explain it, but it's not always good. This does not carry always good memory. This is not, this one is not always a good memory. Like if I'm extremely happy and satisfied with my life, like 3, 4, 5 years ago, I wouldn't be doing this live streaming. I am doing this live streaming because that I have an urge to say something. So the more I know, the more frustrated I get. The more I learn, more sad I become. But somebody gotta do something for that. Especially Boro becomes something completely different, which is good, which is okay. Just stories are important as well. Yeah, learn how to wash is also interesting. It might be interesting if you're interested in Japanese. There's a certain way to wash things too. Water is very, very sacred things in Japan, and I think it's in many cultures it's a sacred thing, but there are some procedures to wash things to sort of cleanse the, I don't want to say evil spirit, but I don't have the word for that in English. Anyway, this is the last thread as I promised. Thank you so much for coming to the Sashiko Live Streaming. Sorry, I'm getting sleepy. So, I hope I explained that Boro a little bit better today. And this is not the first time I explain about Boro. There's so many stories on Instagram and also so many videos. Not so many. There are many videos on YouTube as well. So if you could keep watching, it may help. I don't give the answers so easily because that's gonna create other issues. But as long as there are people like you, the culture is not gonna be completely different. As long as there are people who are listening, and that's the whole purpose of me doing that, as long as there's gonna be my voice left somewhere, it will be okay. Somehow they can choose that. So this is one of the Boro-ish that my mother made, photo shooted. Can I make it bigger? Yeah, there we go. But this is the back side of the Boro. This is the back side, hiding side. Wrong side for that matter. And front side is this one. When you follow the Western value system as the art, you may question why isn't the showing side has less mending or less color than the wrong side, hiding side with many patches. I've explained that very many times already, so you may know that already. If not, think about it why, so I can probably mention that next time. There's a reason that why this is the showing side, this is the front side, this is the official side, and this is the wrong side. But I understand many people like this wrong side more. And there's a very clear story, clear answer for that question why. And I will talk about it next time. Well, briefly, it's not gonna be a long story, so I'm gonna bring some different topic as well. So if you have any request for the theme, please let me know. And as always, if you could press the good button at the end, that'll be really helpful for me to keep this channel as healthy channel. Because again, I keep having it did not increase, so it's the same thing. It's the same either bot or person keep liking me so much, unliking me so much that they like so much. So the request, what was I gonna say? Yeah, if you have any requests, please let me know. Yes, so I will talk about the specific topic if you have any requests, so leave the comments if you're watching this as archive. Otherwise, I will see you next Thursday. Have a good night.